Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're back in War Thunder looking at the last of the Chinese vehicles that are available to us, which are different to the general vehicles that we see on the international client. So this video series has pretty much come to an end after this video. So if there's one that you missed, or if there is something that you would personally like to see covered from the Chinese server, such as maybe some of the aircraft or something like that, please let me know so I can get on that right away. Now, what is the last vehicle that we're looking at today? Well, it's the PT-76. Now, this is an interesting one because on the user mission itself, this one is called the PT-76 Early. On the War Thunder Live post, it's called just the PT-76. Now, the one that we have in the Soviet tree, the one that we have on the international client, is the PT-76B. And now it gets interesting. So, if we just look at the vehicles named PT-76, we get two vehicles. So we get the PT-76, which is the Object 740 1951, and then we also get the PT-76, the Object 740 1957. Now, generally, it's not a thing for the Soviets to actually name two slightly different machines the same name, but in this case, it seems the differences were so minimal, they decided to keep it, the same. So, I am unsure whether this vehicle in-game is either the 1951 version of the PT-76 or the 1957 one. It definitely isn't the one that we have in the Soviet tree, though, and the reason we can tell this is for multiple ones that we'll get into. But first of all, let's have a look at the difference between the 1951 version and the 1957. So the difference is mainly the gun. And there are a few other little ones which we could definitely use to work out which one we're having a look at. But the first major one that you could work out is the first version of the PT-76, the 1951 one, has a D56T 76.2mm gun. Now, the 1957 version has the D56TM, so it's an upgraded version of the same gun. And also, the second version has its hull height slightly increased, and the reason they did this is for better cross-country maneuverability. And so you can tell them apart physically from the outside. Now, the issue is, because I can't tell height in this game, and also when I don't have another PT-76 next to me, then I can't tell which one this one is, because I don't have like a standard to actually work from. The PT-76B would be a standard, but unfortunately it's not in the test drive, so I can't, park this tank up to it. So let's go on to the differences between this one and the PT-76B. So the 76B was obviously the upgraded version of the Object 740, which is, the one you're looking at right now. And the differences, once again, are the fact that the PT-76B has the D56TS 76.2mm. It also had a new diesel engine. It was a V6B 6-cylinder 4-stroke inline water-cooled diesel, 263 horsepower at 1800 RPM. And so the main differences were a little bit more power under the hood and also improvement in the gun. Now, when it comes to what ammunition all of these guns can fire, it seems like they can fire very similar ammunition, and those types of ammunition are HE, heat, and then a sub-caliber APT round. This means that you can actually fire a specific AP round even though it is lower caliber through the gun, which is kind of cool by itself. Now, what does this mean? Well, it means that it's easy to tell these two apart. The PT-76 that we're looking at has no bore evacuator or, no fume extraction system or anything like that on the barrel, and it also has a long multi-slotted muzzle brake. So if we're just talking about, appearances, it's very easy to tell them apart. So that's where we have to start from. Now, let's talk about a little bit of history on the PT-76, and we'll go into why it relates to the Chinese tech tree. So the PT-76 reconnaissance tank prototype, it was built at the Kirov plant in 1950, and the tank was officially adopted into service on the 6th of August 1951, and the production started at the Stalingrad Tractor Factory, or the STZ, with production ending in 1967, and it's believed that roughly 12,000 of these were built. It was seen as a very, very good tank in what it was supposed to do. What it was supposed to do is reconnaissance and also amphibious warfare. A lot of areas in the world do need vehicles which are amphibious, and therefore the PT-76 saw a lot of success in these areas. It was also exported to many different countries which made their own specific variants, and this meant that, you have some really weird and wacky ones running around. You could also kind of see it as the grandfather of machines such as the BMP, which have gone on to great success for the Soviets and also other nations, being kind of a testbed for the ideas that finally go into the BMP. Now, how does this all relate to China? Well, simple, really. When we look at China, one of the things that they did quite a lot, if we look at the Type 59, the Type 58, and also a bunch of other vehicles that we've had a look at, they heavily were inspired, let's say, by Soviet designs. Now, they decided in the mid-1950s that they wanted to clone a PT-76, just like they cloned a T-54A to create the Type 59. So they obtained a few PT-76s in the mid-1950s, and in the October of 1958, the People's Liberation Army, or the PLA, decided that they wanted to develop a indigenous amphibious tank based on the PT-76. So the development program was carried out by 201 Institute and 615 Factory, and a prototype known as the WZ-221 was built and tested in 1959. But the issue with this design is it struggled from a few problems, such as engine overheating, and the PLA was not satisfied with the performance of the vehicle. This led to the development of a new vehicle which was based on this idea, which was the Type 63. Now, we've had a look at the Type 63 in a previous vehicle, so I won't go into it too much, but just understand that to say that the PT-76 was used in the design of the Type 63 would be completely correct. It was definitely, when you look at the Type 63, yes, it had its differences, yes, it had its own Chinese, way of doing things, but it's still heavily influenced by the general design of the PT-76. So the PT-76 early that we see in game is technically, you could actually put it in the Chinese tree under a different name if players were not happy with the PT-76 name. You could actually put it in as either the WZ-221, which was what the factory would have named the thing. Remember, if a vehicle is called a WZ and then a number, that is a factory name, and then it gets its actual designation later on when it either enters service or when, it's decided upon. So generally, Chinese tanks have either one or two names. A lot of people colloquially say that the WZ is kind of the prototype name of a vehicle, and I think personally I'd be okay with that. But yeah, so if you wanted to, instead of calling this in the PT-76 early or the PT-76 object, object 740, they could instead call it the Type 60, or they could call it the WZ-221. And from that regard, if you've never played the PT-76, it's a fast vehicle with not a lot of armor. It is subject to hull break. The gun on it is very good, stabilized, which is nice for its tier. One of the issues with it, though, is that it doesn't really have that much of a powerful engine, and in War Thunder there's no real use for amphibious vehicles, so you're kind of relying on that gun to do a lot of work. The other problem is the reload rate. Not the best, and because of this, if you don't land a good first heat shot, you are sat in a position where people will just come around the corner and annihilate you. This is at the same time, once people realize you are in a PT-76, what they'll just do is artillery you. because once again you have no armor. There's a lot of light vehicles in the game where it's very easy to artillery them, and this one is exactly the same. You'll get killed a lot of the times from about like 10 meters away, where the shrapnel will actually, bounce off the ground and hit your tank, and it doesn't make you feel good. But overall, I found success with the vehicle using it as a scout, and because a lot of Soviet teams around 5.7 are very, very aggressive, what this means is you can use it to scout while your team goes forward in stuff like T-34-85s, IS-2s, and make it so it is easier for them to advance and they know what they're going to shoot at. I think that is the great strength of the PT-76. The problem with it is, though, it does take time to get to those forward positions where you need to be an aggressive scout, because its engine power isn't great. Overall, I definitely think this should be added to the Chinese tree. I would personally change its name, though, to either the Type 60 or the WZ221, and I think it would be a great light tank to have. Unfortunately, when we look at a lot of Chinese designs, yes, they're heavily influenced by Soviet designs, but they're still built in China. And it depends where you sit on this specific issue. If a vehicle is a copy of one, but it is an indigenous copy, it's built in China, everything is Chinese, do you class that as a new vehicle? And this is what we're running into right now. Now that we're getting more and more into the modern age as well, we see a lot more sharing of information, we see a lot more collaborations between countries. Where is the point going to be where we decide, what is okay and what is not on that scale? For me personally, if we are putting in a Chinese tree at some point, just remember, I've never said we are or we aren't. There is no we here. I'm just a content creator. But from like a community point of view, when it comes to, actually advocating for this, you have to make this decision for yourself. Are you okay with a vehicle which is not homegrown, but a clone of another one, which is indigenous to that said country? And, well, it's time to wrestle with it. Let's see what you come up with. And if the answer is yes, there's a chance that a lot of different and weird designs could come out. If the answer is no, then we have to think about other options. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little series of videos, and tomorrow I'll bring you something very special. Let's just say it's got something to do with parasite fighters. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.